Twin gouts of superheated green hellfire tearing down those tight hab corridors of life. We are the pure and searing Promethean belch of justice. 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. Coming to you live tonight from Mama Kaz's Noodle House.
And just when you thought the Underhive was safe again, them glass eaters gotta go and ruin it all. Starting shit with the Splatterhawks this week. Might boil down to another damn turf war. It's probably not looking too good for them glass eaters, though. I'll tell you, those Splatterhawks, they make a mess of everything.
Glass rots the brain, but an axe to the forehead, gonna mess your day up, touch faster.
Never backing us into a corner because he couldn't find one even if it was on the map. It's Marky.
But it is, host.
Freezing hearts just as fast as he warms up the ladies. It's the polar bear of the Frost Hollow himself, ChuckeFly.
Hello, everyone.
Expressing a little too much glee with every single one of those long-lasting blasts of rolling flame, it's Kev.
Oh, that's me.
And soaking up as much of that neon radiation as I can, I'm your host, Goblin King. Welcome to episode 65 of Under the Hive of Madness. This time we are going to talk about weapons and tech of the Hive, continuing with all our coverage on those things that are Hivey. This is our second deeper dive into the weapons and technology of Warhammer 40k. The first one was a little rough. We didn't really know what we were doing. We probably still don't know what we're doing, but we have a little bit of a better idea how we want to structure them. Last time we tried to do one of those, we're going to cover all of the weapons and all of the technology and all of 4K in 2 episodes. 40K, not 4K. Of all of 40K in 2 episodes. And then as we started to get into it, we're like, wow.
There's a lot of shit.
Fucking ever.
There's a lot of shit. Yep.
Today, we're going to specifically be looking at the technology and the weapons, or the weapons and the technology of the Hive and of Hive World specifically. Follows really nicely off of our coverage of Dark Tide. Next episode, we're also going to bring you a little bit more of Hivey goodness or Hive-related goodness as we dive into some creative writing and world-building stuff. But we wanted to look today into what makes the Hive function and how Hive gangers may arm themselves.
Could be fun. We don't know yet. We'll find out.
We'll see. We'll see what kind of toys everyone's into.
It could blow up in your hand.
So
that pretty much describes everything in Underhive.
So I mean, in the Hive, anything could be a weapon, right?
Yep, that's 100% correct.
You guys ever play Saints Row?
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
You know,
Are you referring to the
Ryan's
giant
tone.
purple two-handed melee weapon?
I was going to say Ryan's tone shows that he knows where I'm going with this.
So, yeah, the giant two-handed floppy purple melee weapon is
Yes.
the direction you're going.
Is it double-headed floppy purple weapon?
No, it has a baseball bat handle.
Yeah, it does. I actually think it was Grand Theft Auto Vice City before the Violation guys had left, the guys that made Saints Row. If you went into the police station in the they didn't call it the Castro district. Maybe they did call it the Castro district. But if you went into the like Latin, the very obvious Cuban, that's what they called it. They called it the Cuban district. In the Cuban district, if you go into the police department and you go into the bathroom, the locker room in Vice City, there's a double-headed purple dildo that you can pick up and use as a weapon.
What?
Yeah, it's great times.
That's where it came from.
And then when they made when they made Saints Row, they brought that over.
So the guys,
then they have that in the Boys TV show.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The guys that were
great fight scene.
The guys that were involved with the cheekier BS that was part of Grand Theft Auto that left are the guys that formed Violation, which is the studio that did Saints Row.
Grand Theft Auto took a certain turn at a certain point.
After
Grand Theft Auto 4 got a little bit more serious.
Well, because, I mean, I've been playing it since 1. Like, I actually played 1 and 2 on PC
Don't be a gatekeeper, Kevin.
No, it's not gatekeeping. I'm just saying.
You're like, well, with your pinky out, I've been playing since Grand Theft Auto
1 and 2 were
One.
very like
the top down, like what do you call it? Twin stick shooter.
At the top down.
Yeah, exactly. And it had a story, but you were like balancing the reputation of a bunch of gangs, and like that changed when it went to 3. All of a sudden you didn't have the reputation of a bunch of gangs to worry about. It was all of a sudden it had like a crazy narrative story, and then 4 came out and it tried to like do this like noir, like
Vice City was my favorite one.
And Vice City was crazy because
cocaine snorting Ray Liotta.
It didn't take itself seriously, and that was a whole thing with Vice City. It was like, okay, so we had 3, let's do 3 but crazy. So they did Vice City, and then it moved on to 4, and it like got into this like weird like slice of life drama stuff going on. Good game nonetheless, but like it was a weird direction for it to take after Vice City.
What was that?
5 came out, and it's like deranged meth head madness. Like what happened?
Yeah, 5 kind of went back towards the original
just
humor
like
again a little bit.
Just like Underhivers.
Yeah.
What was your question, Marky?
Oh, that car at the that was not the Infernus. What was the Ferrari called?
The Maibatsu Thunder.
Is that?
Yeah.
I don't really.
Yep.
There's a bunch of different cars, and they basically have
I know because
a real world analogy for most car companies. The German car companies
like the scooter,
are
the
like
moped.
mashed together into
Everybody knows what the moped's called.
Oh yeah, the Figio.
So the reason that I know it's the Maibatsu Thunder is to get into character for Goblin King to come up with the crazy shit that I do in the intros and the outros. I used to listen to a lot of Vice City and a lot of Grand Theft Auto 3
personas,
radio stuff, and
Love it.
Whenever you hear or whenever you see lightning, or maybe it's the Maibatsu lightning. It's either the Maibatsu lightning or the Maibatsu thunder, because the commercial is whenever you see lightning, there's thunder. The Maibatsu thunder.
You're listening to the vulture.
Yep. The fucking vulture.
I always like the ones when it was talking about the giant American SUV.
Yeah, I can't remember what that one's called, but that one's ridiculously over top. I also like the very obvious Arnold Schwarzenegger ripoff movie, Eradicator.
Yeah, Eradicator.
Like Eradicator 4 and Eradicator 5, and then all of the ammunition commercials that are like, there's no subtlety. It's like, do you not trust the government? Do you know that they're coming for your food stamps? Protect what's yours by coming down to ammunition. And you're just like, wow, guys, you're not even sugarcoating it at all, are you?
Nope.
You've played Cyberpunk, right?
Eradicated.
Literally, the news broadcast is saying like, and a statement from the police suggests being armed whenever going outside of police jurisdiction.
That's the other video game that we referenced a lot when we were coming up with the Hive stuff. Was the like
the
27
City,
found dead at the bottom of an elevator shaft in Night City, and then like they immediately move over to, and in other news, fashion this week, purple is back in, and you're just like, wow, Cyberpunk, that took a left fucking turn.
That's fucking awesome. I love that kind of shit, and that's pretty much how Hive News probably is anyway.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and the severed head was found at the bottom of the elevator shaft. In other news. Administratum profits are up 32%. Yeah.
In other news, don't forget to pray to the Emperor at 4 p.m. tonight.
Right. And then we totally do it. We should. Oh, that'd be funny. We should come up with like the actual radio, like the Administratum radio station, because very obviously the whole Hive perspective, like we are constantly talking trash on the Imperium. Can you imagine the actual station?
Like what they're actually saying.
We would actually have to pick the proper
it would be
proper propaganda government that has already pre-existed.
It wouldn't be that hard to come up with the dialect, though.
Yeah,
no.
To go with, because it's all going to be about, and we're having to decide what kind of Inquisitor a governor is running the planet and how hardcore it is.
Oh, well, so Innsmouth.
It's run by a bunch of noble houses.
Innsmouth is the primary hive of the world. It's the seat of governmental power.
Super hardcore, or is it like just keep your ass in line?
So House of Modus is a noble house that's incredibly rich, and they control the entire subsector.
Yeah.
They control the Dunwich subsector, and in subtle air quote nods, most of the Carcosan sector. But they're riddled with a cult that follows a dark god, a dark power.
Oh,
We could probably take a lot of the
Emperor
dark tide
protects, but
quotes.
Immodus provides.
Probably could. Yeah. The Emperor protects, but Immodus provides. Yeah, it'd totally be that bend. Immodus is your stereotypical Dan Abnett noble house, is the way that I kind of designed them. They are
little uppity.
They're in complete control, but they are completely corrupted. If the Inquisition ever comes, but it's one of those things where like they control so much water and water rights that like, is the Imperium really going to try to take them out?
Have enough of the correct persona out there, so nobody's like, oh, wow.
100%.
Yeah, it's like in certain states, it's illegal to, collect rainwater.
Yeah,
It's illegal to collect snow from outside the hive.
Yeah,
So
you can't even chip ice off pipes, man.
Yeah, that's Imperium ice.
That's Imperium
ice.
That's Imperium.
That ice belongs to the Imperium.
How dare you poach that ice?
You're like, dude, it's blue. It's not even drinkable. It's still mine.
Is it frozen?
It's mostly coolant. I don't understand.
Is it frozen? It's ice.
It's all right. It's sweet. It's just flavor. It's like Kool-Aid. It's the Kool-Aid of
30 years in the mine
frozen radiator fluid.
It's piping.
You know what? You're chipping away on that ice. Guess what? It's 30 years in the ice mine for you now.
Right.
I see you like chipping ice.
You want to chip ice? All right.
Boy.
Well, let's put you on double labor duty.
Boy, I see you
Chip
got
ice
some
all day and
skills
night.
there. Yeah. Right.
Looking a little thick too. Half rations.
You ever wonder what it's like to be a servitor? I'll get you fixed right on up.
Now your new favorite weapon is an ice pick.
Right. Oh man, that's the Corridor 54 killer we've already established skins people alive and hangs them upside down, but we probably need an ice pick killer too. It only makes sense.
That'd be sweet.
All right, guys.
Yep.
So to get into the meat of the episode, the Stellar Exodus is where we're going to start.
Like how he did that.
So
Ice pick killer to the meat of the episode.
getting right there, stabbing right into the meat.
Stabbing right into the meat.
Harvesting.
This time period is marked by the Imperial savants as starting out about a millennia before the age of technology officially starts in M15. Before this time, humanity had mostly been confined just to the Sol system, expanding and colonizing as many planets as it could within those confines. So this time period that comes right at the beginning of the Solar Exodus, or right before the Solar Exodus, is where we land on the moon, we land on Mars, we land on, pick a body that orbits something in our solar system. We've put people on it. We've started mining it, all of that. It's actually kind of... What's up?
I was saying preferably.
Mining it?
No, you're saying pick a body to land on.
Pick a body. Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, I was a little late with the delivery on that one.
Okay.
That's a good zinger. It's just weirdly timed.
That's for everybody who hasn't buffered yet.
The weird thing about this to me, and I don't know how you guys are, because I obviously deep into science fiction lore in general, and this is my preferred science fiction universe to get super deep into. But it's weird that by the 15th millennium now, and to remind you guys, we are in M3. If you want to know where modern day falls in the calendar of 40k, we are in M3. We're already looking at or talking about the next 50 to 100 years being the moon is colonized, Mars is colonized, we're starting to reach out further and further. And those are probably...
Jesus. So 40K is like 37 M's further ahead than us?
Yeah. Yeah, 37 more M's.
37 M's.
37,000 years ahead of us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I said. 37 M's.
Right. So so M15 is 15,000 years. So 12,000 years from now.
12,000. Yeah.
So it's taken us 12,000 years to colonize the entire Sol system, which seems slow.
Seems really slow. Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that.
Now, a lot of that could be, and this happens a lot in science fiction. If we were to talk about Shadowrun is a great example. The role-playing setting of Shadowrun. In Shadowrun, deckers, which are hackers, were confined to jacking into the internet, taking a cord and plugging it in behind their ear until the 5th edition of the game came out. And the 5th edition of the game came out in the late 2010s, like 2015, early 2010s, probably like 2013, 2014. That was the first time that they introduced Wi-Fi as a concept to the game world. So Wi-Fi had existed in the real world for so long, but they were like, yeah, in 2070, they finally have Wi-Fi. And I think that's just one of these things that happens.
Now,
all of these games have their roots in like the late 70s, early 80s.
And that's the thing. They probably already have a timeline. They're already doing stuff. And it's one of those things people complain about when they start altering. It's like, yeah, well, we didn't know where it was going to go. So this is the route we went. We don't want to go this sci-fi genre because what is it? Star Trek?
Oh yeah, Star Trek is 2500s, so you're 500 years from now, and they're already
100. Well, the way Star Trek works in like 1999 or whatever it is, first contact's made, and then within 50 years of that, we have the propulsion. We're sending out fleets. We're doing everything.
Right.
So it's really fast in that one.
It spikes rapidly.
We're uplifted.
In a way, we're halfway uplifted.
Yeah.
We find evidence of a crashed Vulcan at some point, but then also where the humans are about to invent the what is it?
Light speed.
Yeah,
the warp drive.
They have a specific name for it. The Cochrane engine.
Yeah.
Was
Cochrane
like the engine
engine
that takes
Cochrane engine, yeah.
Which I think is like the impulse power. So like they stop using chemical rockets,
powering the Cochrane,
and that's when the Vulcans are like,
exactly.
Okay, you guys are worth just like we'll give you the next step.
Yeah.
And so they gave us a warp drive, and rather than figure out, how do we make lots of we figured out how to make more warp drives, and then we just bolted 2 of them next to each other because we were
it makes
like,
it go faster.
Yeah,
it's orc logic right there.
we orked it. And
hey baby, if one barrel shoots 1 bullet, 2 barrels will shoot 2 bullets.
Right?
I've doubled my efficiency.
That's the whole thing with 40k with the original creators and how they did everything. They had their idea.
Yeah.
Really didn't fill it in. And now it's like, well, we're just going to show humans took a while to do stuff.
Well,
that's why everything's so far out in the future.
The 40k universe, the 40k lore and storyline is also very, very clear and involved with these apocalyptic wars.
Things that happen, yeah.
Who knows how many times, it's very possible that by the end of M3, humans had colonized the entire solar system, and then it fell into infighting,
and then figured shit out. And then eventually came back. Yeah.
Well, the Enslaver plague, who knows when the Enslaver plague hits? Maybe the Enslaver plague hits in M5. Maybe Necrons fucking tooled through the galaxy or the solar system at some point. We don't really know anything. And it's left ambiguous on purpose.
Yeah.
But it's definitely it's just one of those interesting footnotes. It was interesting to me that it took 15,000 years for us to colonize the solar system.
And the Emperor sprinkles knowledge in and doesn't get involved.
But does that mean like we're
full colonization was achieved by M15?
Like Mars terraformed, colonized, Jupiter cloud bases and everything. Okay.
Yeah. Full colonization by M15. M15 we had filled Sol system and needed to expand.
That doesn't surprise me so much, like, because you're saying in comparison to what we're thinking now,
but
Mars won't. We don't even have any idea how to terraform Mars, like other
Right.
than mold. Like go with algae and shit, but that would take too long.
But what we do know is that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the idea of carrying a phone around in your pocket was unheard
Star
of.
Trek. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
20 years ago, having a phone that was more powerful than the computers that landed on the moon was unheard of. And today we have essentially instant connection to the internet, which is a database of majority of the entirety of human knowledge at our fingertips. So like,
yeah, so you can only imagine 100 years from now.
So
technology expands exponentially.
just got done watching Ace Ventura with the family, and he
Got it. Found a way to put it into the Stellar Exodus.
he rips out a pager and looks at it, and my daughter was like,
What's that?
"What's that?" I'm like, "That's a pager." She's like, "What's that for?" And
I am gonna smack the young off of you,
you know what
child.
you know what the pager? You know what the pager was really for? Booty calls.
I was gonna say sex is a joke, but all right.
No,
I had a
that's
pager.
That's the only reason why he had one.
I was gonna say I don't really have an argument against him, but I had a pager.
Like, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
He's out of line.
He's out of line.
I am
But he's not
out of line.
So to get back onto the Stellar Exodus, sublight starships could take on what was called the Long March. So this is a generation ship, and these are effectively isolated from one another and Terra the farther away they move from the homeworld. Essentially, the longer these trips took, the more isolated the passengers on these generation ships became. So if they're going to the Kuiper Belt, which is the very outside of our solar system, they're still going to be able to get a message back to Terra. It's just going to take a little bit of time. They're going to go to Alpha Centauri, which is 4 light years away from us. It's going to take a little bit longer for the message to travel back and forth, but they're still going to have a little bit. And, you know, by M15 and by the sublight engines that are described in Warhammer 40k, and assuming that a lot of that technology had been perfected or hasn't changed a lot between the age of technology and 40k timeline, that we could guess that their engines are probably much, much more capable of getting them just to the edge, if not a little bit past the speed of light by the novels. Ships don't take years to get from the edge of the solar system to the interior solar system. They take days. There's obviously some sci-fi chicanery happening.
There has to be.
Shenaniganery.
Shenanigans.
Shenaniganery.
I'm gonna pistol whip the next motherfucker who says shenanigans.
Chuck, what's the name of that bar you really like?
What's the name of that restaurant with all the things
What?
hanging off the roof?
Shenanigan Farms.
This effectively restricted or made interstellar trade impossible, and these long march vessels and their passengers had to be extremely self-sufficient upon arriving at their destination. Many of these long march vessels established the colonies that later became night worlds, as they carried the designs for combat and labor walkers that we now call knights. In many cases, the standard template constructs were also making these journeys with them, as these massive machines were capable of great feats of engineering and production. Standard template constructs, what we've talked about in the past, we mentioned them last episode, were essentially capable of taking any building base material and making it into something. So you feed rock into it, you're going to get rock products, and they're going to be a lot stronger than, you're not just going to get a rock brick, you're going to get a ferrocrete brick, you're going to get a reinforced rock brick. You feed iron into it, you're going to get steel weapons and chain swords and whatever else, whatever pattern you pick. And they're kind of described somewhere between nanobot factories, massive AIs, and crazy libraries.
So like feces pattern helmet?
Yeah, yes, your feces pattern helmet. But thinking about an STC as a magic box that you can throw stuff into and get something, it's weird. An STC is described both as a magic box that you can throw poopy into and get cars out of, and like cars made out of normal material, not poopy.
Guano cars.
Yeah,
the whole set.
You put guano in it, and you get out a Ferrari made out of
you
carbon.
don't want to take
fiber.
a ride in my Guan-wagon?
So nice.
Were all the STCs able to make everything, or were specific ones designed to make specific things?
That's the interesting part, and this is
depends on which author wrote the story.
And this is where the haziness of the 40k universe comes into. STCs may not have been perfect nanofactories. STCs may have been giant libraries that contained all of the blueprints to do this stuff.
Yep.
And part of that would be
hook it to a factory.
And then part of that would be like 3D printers and all that shit existed. Now, to get to your question, because we're not going to dive super deep into STCs in this episode other than to mention them a couple of times.
Yeah.
The problem is not many STCs that have been found are whole. In fact, one of the only places that there might be a complete intact STC in the Imperium, we're not going to talk about Leagues of Votann, is Von Scar in Hive Primus on Necromunda is rumored to have a complete full STC, which is why they're able to get all of their random whack-ass crazy high-level technology. If you've ever seen the Van Scar gangers from Necromunda, they've got like hoverboards and walking robot mechs that look like they're out of anime. And
don't they have hover bikes also?
They've got hover bike. They've got all sorts of crazy shit. They've got energy shields. They've got these like metal plates that make energy shields. The Von Scar have technology that nobody else in the entire Imperium has access to.
Yeah, Van Sar.
Yeah, because I was asking because there is a novel. That's why I was asking, because there's a novel I've read that talks about one, and it's the God Pattern Titan.
Right. In a lot of cases, what happens is they find an STC
and they're corrupt,
and it's either so damaged or so corrupted that it's only capable of making one thing, or they're only able to unlock one thing. And whether or not that means, so let's put a supposition out there that an STC is actually a library. It's a collected library that has an AI construct, whether that's a cybernetic being or whether or not that's a computer interface that runs it. And it's got to be a certain size. So let's say if you've seen, I think it's Winter Soldier, but it might be Civil War, where they go to the base in New Jersey and they get down into the dude who's made himself a computer. Okay, So you've got this big facility. Say you have a 18,000 square foot hangar, and that's an STC. And inside that,
the floppy disk are all broken except one.
Right, not floppy disks, but reel-to-reel servers like still exist on the internet today. There's a couple at MIT, and the whole room is just full of these, floor to ceiling, the size of a vending machine, reel-to-reel machines, and only one of them in that entire thing works. That's the way that I think we're supposed to be looking at STCs.
Gotcha.
So they find one, and they find its capabilities.
Imagine something along those lines, but also like, or it only has the ability to load one thing and then it's stuck. Like that's it.
Right. Or it's like a jukebox and it's got all these different records and it can only load one at a time.
Exactly.
And whatever the last one it loaded is the only thing.
And that's what it's stuck on.
It's the only one not
you don't even get a choice. It's just whatever the last thing it was on.
And most of that is the Imperium, Mars specifically, has no idea how to work these anymore.
They know how to turn it on and they know how to keep it going. They don't know how to actually work it.
And they know how to copy what it's saying in order to put it into other machines.
Gotcha.
Because obviously some level of manufacturing survived because Forge Worlds.
Because that's what trips me out. So like, the human expansion happens like we're talking about. All this stuff happens. All these colonies had exactly the same thing. You can only ever find 3.
Right. Like the examples of STCs we have are the God Titan one that you mentioned. We have
which was
the
corrupted.
We have the one that could make Men of Iron that was also corrupted, that was destroyed. We have the one that produced a new pattern of bayonet, which got a guardsman and his buddy their own planet. We have the one that would make the Bane blade, which was in one of the super old. I actually think it's in a
the Lehman Russes are that. The Land Raiders are that.
Yeah, yep. Lehman Russ and Land Raider.
Terminator pattern armor is that, but Terminator pattern armor is actually just for construction.
Yep. Knights come in two patterns. There's combat knights and there's labor knights. And it's pretty much, it's kind of left hazy, but some of the weapons that you can put on specifically old pattern knights, like the grav claws and stuff like that. Yeah, sure, they can be used as weapons, but was that a construction item that we're now using as a weapon? Like, are the chain swords really for cutting down trees, or is it for cutting down, you have to start thinking and that's important. That's why we brought up knights in our.
That's how my knights in my rogue trader
that's what I think,
stuff
that's
is
what
used.
I think is neat about the weapons, because it's like when you read a lot of the lore, it's like it's not the actual military stuff, it's actual construction stuff. So it's like, how gnarly was the old military weapons armor?
Right. Exactly. The end of the solar exodus came about in M18, and that was with the introduction of the warp drive and the Geller field, which will definitely get their own weapons and tech episode or chunk. However, we're going to go back to these early colonies and kind of take a look at how they formed. So these early colonies were like isolated islands in a vast and endlessly dark ocean, much like the far-flung islands of the South Pacific Ocean. Just like in our real world, many of these colonies on these different planets developed in isolation. That means that they came up with their own diverse takes on culture and language based on humanity. And that's one of the reasons that there was such a conflict as the Great Crusade came through, because they would find these just vastly different from the Imperium, vastly different from Terran cultures that had arisen. Upon arrival at a suitable world, which was often picked for its mining and production or agricultural resources, the colonists would immediately cannibalize their ship with no regard for the idea of ever making a return trip to Terra. And these are generation ships. It's described as most of them taking close to 100 years. And we know that the core worlds were settled first before the warp drive and Geller field came out. However, knowing relativistic speeds, again, I think that their sublight engines were like pushing light speed, if not going a little bit past it.
Because, to get as far as they went. I mean, there's definitely science fancy mumbo jumbo in the way that a lot of this works, it's great. It's science fiction space opera. They caused solar wind and rode the wind.
Right. You get on a ship with your wife and your kids, and you know that you're going to travel from Terra to this planet that some probe has picked out, and it's going to take 75 years. So you and your kids grow old and die. Both generations will, maybe not die, but grow old to the point where you're retired, and your kids are probably retired as well, and they've had children with other people on the ship. So the generation of colonists that are building things and operating machinery have no connection to Terra. It's gone. They've got the stories of parents.
Never met her.
Yeah, right. So they're basically like, we ain't going back. We have everything we need. And the ships were built in a way that they could be pulled apart. This is something that's reflected in the modern Imperium. We've got this idea of like, what does a hab block look like? What does a this look like? What does a that look like? And they're all these standard patterns.
I'd put a little bit of money on the hab block is actually the living section from a generation ship cut up and slapped on its side somewhere.
Yeah. And then they were just like, okay, well, this works. We'll just keep endlessly copying it, especially when you have an STC that's capable of copying a habitation capsule over and over and over again.
Especially when the STC is fed, preemptively designed, knowing what kind of ship it's going to be attached to, and then can be like, oh, okay, well, you're going to have these parts in your ship. So if you take tab A and section D and you weld those together, then you end up with a water purification plant.
Right.
Things
and that's
like
what they did. They took the ships apart. They used what they could for habitation modules, and then they fed the rest into the STCs to get back what they needed. While these STCs carried plans to make the giant walking combat robots we just mentioned, known as knights, they also contained pretty much everything else in the sum of human knowledge. That's how an STC is described. A fully functioning STC at that point included how to build everything, from a butter knife to a thermonuclear reactor. Nowadays, Mars gets excited when they find an STC that has a toaster and can make a toaster. But back in the day, it made everything. As a footnote, many of these worlds, including the Night Worlds, had been long and well established thousands of years before the foundation of the Imperium. So keep in mind as we talk about Hive Cities and as we talk about these different little tweaks and weirdnesses of the technology and culture, that a lot of that exists because these places were founded and in a lot of cases contacted local planets and became their own little kingdoms thousands of years before the Age of Strife ended.
Yep.
Where a ship was pulled apart to make a landing site camp, a town eventually grows, with other towns growing in nearby areas as the colony expands and more resources are needed. I think it's pretty safe to assume as an economic cycle ramps up, these towns will grow from the original landing site, which will become a fortress or a castle possibly, and then the core of a city. Over hundreds of years of expansion and development, these outlying towns will grow into cities of their own. Even as humanity continues to push out those borders and explore more of the world, clusters of cities will slowly expand over decades, making interconnected urban sprawls where the edge of each city gets lost. These urban sprawls expand into megacities. Eventually, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years after these colony ships have landed, the foundations of what will become a hive city have been nice and well laid out. And this is just something that we can kind of see looking at the last 300 years of human history. A lot of the places that are now big cities started out as little tiny settlements.
Because it had the resources.
Oh, yeah.
So
if not multiple little tiny settlements that merged.
How big is a generation ship compared to a planet?
So a generation ship would be somewhere...
I'd say something like New York City sized, if not larger.
Yeah.
Slightly larger.
You're talking something probably 2 to 3 times the size of a battle barge. A battle barge is 19 kilometers tip to tip.
And all of that's just starting material essentially for that colony.
It's everything that the colonists need to survive during the journey. So you're going to have oxygen farms.
It's a space station essentially on its way. It's a space station / ship. When it gets there, it's a scrapyard.
Think of the movie Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt, or Pandorum, the horror film. Those are both generation ships.
Let's see. What's other?
You've seen Trigon.
Trying to think of other examples.
Those ships were generation ships, and how the anime progresses, you see how some of the towns get developed.
Right.
They're pulling apart the crashed ships, and that's what they're using to build everything.
Okay.
Picture the Phalanx, the largest ship that the Imperium currently has. Probably strip most of its armaments out. It probably just has basic defenses and mostly shielding, and then fill it with citizens. And the idea is, you have to have a certain population of humans to have a viable colony. And, people say it's 15 men to, 25 women or whatever. And there's all these
whatever the minimum
equations.
Amount is. Yeah.
And none of those are necessarily right once you get past the 4th generation, because then literally cousins. There's too much cousin marrying happening.
Yeah, you really need more.
Looking at small island populations, especially small island populations that are very successful, you're talking between 400 and several thousand people. So that's probably more realistic. 1, 2, how many people might accidentally die in the trip?
So-and-so fell out the airlock.
And to give you an idea how big Flanks is, it has battle barges just in its rafters in some places.
Oh.
The Phalanx has the ability to dock 14 battle barges on its
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Like main
With
body.
the way it's described in one of the books is the stuff that's just stowed, that's so old that they don't use, actually starting to have its own whatever ecosystems grow
Like
on them.
microclimates and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how massive that ship is.
Gnarly.
You remember the space station in Starship Troopers?
Yes.
You remember how the what looked like all the big spaceships were all like nestled up like little baby pigs?
Yeah.
It's like that, but way bigger.
The official phalanx lore. The phalanx is a main body, and then it has 2 wings that extend off of each side. The main body is capable of docking 14 battle barges, and we know a battle barge is 19 kilometers long. And if a battle barge is 19 kilometers long, it's probably maybe 1.5 kilometers wide, just based on the ratio of looking at the model. If you can fit 14 of those, you're talking about a craft that's probably 20 kilometers across in its main body. So the phalanx is probably the size of, it's probably a little bit bigger than a Tomb class Karen ship, which is the largest Necron ship that exists. That big crescent thing.
Yeah.
And then the
Wasn't
Dirge
the
of Eternity
phalanx
is
like,
almost twice that size. No.
Didn't it look like a big old spinning top? It looked more like a space station than like a ship.
It
Yes.
rivaled the size. So the way the novels are, it rivals the size of the ship that the Emperor had.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's how massive it is.
The phalanx is like
It's
described.
old.
It's described as like a diamond, and then the diamond has these like delta wings that sweep back from it.
Okay.
So think like a pyramid on top, and then a pyramid on bottom, but obviously not a pyramid, and then 2 wings that come off the back.
And since we're talking about it, how generation ships are probably that size, that could have been a generation ship because the way it's described is like
I thought Dorn
has it.
designed it.
Did he design it? It's super old. I think it's before Dorn.
Oh, did he find it and like restore it?
No, it was part of the Inuit Empire.
There's the phalanx, Marky.
It's fucking massive. And look,
It's essentially a mobile
battle
space
barge
station.
right there near it.
Yeah,
What's that?
That's a battle barge right there.
Let's see the battle barge.
Jesus.
No, that's a cruiser.
Oh, it's a cruiser.
But yeah, I mean,
that
still,
thing's massive.
It's massive. The only things larger than the phalanx there's
like a couple space stations, I think.
There's a Tyranid thing. Oh, ships. There's a Tyranid bioship that's larger. There's a Necron, an unknown Necron ship of unknownness. That's how it's described. Unknown Necron ship that's larger. And then the Blackstone Fortress. And to give you an idea of the difference of scale, the center portion of the Blackstone Fortress could fit 44 phalanxes next to each other inside of it.
Jesus.
Yeah, the Blackstone Fortresses.
It's a planet.
I didn't realize they were that big.
Ridiculously. Yeah, they're huge.
They're
so
planets.
In relation to these giant ships, does anything ever give the size of the Esperanza?
The Esperanza?
The Esperanza was a ancient Dark Age technology nonsense relic ship that was so embedded in the crust of the planet that nobody knew it was a ship for the longest time. Just activating its machine spirit, like reawakening it, like killed half the population of the planet.
That's an angry machine spirit.
It's called the Esperanza.
Right. What's the story that it comes out of?
It's in its own story. It's the same one where the tech priest like has to beg it to use its weapons, and then it decides it's like, I guess, and it opens up some like crazy portion of the ship that the tech priest didn't know was there, teleports an Eldar ship back in time so that it hits it with a weapon.
The Esperanza is the size of a continent. So the Esperanza would be as big as the Blackstone Fortress.
Okay. So it's essentially a Blackstone Fortress that isn't a Blackstone Fortress kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a massive ship.
It's really cool story. And like the whole conversation with the tech priest and the machine spirit is really cool. The way the imagery that it uses.
The way the machine spirit makes him beg.
No, it's funny because the machine spirit's like, but why? Like, it's like, please help us use, you have to like activate the weapons on the ship. And he's like, the machine spirit says, you've already activated the normal weapons. What are you talking about? And he goes, no, it's not good enough. And then it's like, now
I'm not good enough for you. Huh?
Oh, I guess. I guess this annoying thing that's flying around blasting holes in me should probably be dealt with. Okay.
So I'm gonna send his ass back in
so
time.
it literally sends his ass back in time so he occupies the same space as himself simultaneously and then fires a fucking doom laser through it to kill both of them simultaneously.
That's crazy.
They're among the largest of Imperial starships. Their extreme mass of these vessels creates distorted gravity field equivalent to its strength of an unstable moon.
Nice.
Wider than a Dominator class cruiser is long. So a Dominator class cruiser is 15 kilometers long from tip to tip. So these things are 15 kilometers wide.
That's
nice.
Thick.
That would be like the size of a generational ship.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Their interior industrial capabilities rival that of most Hive cities, with kilometers and along kilometers of manufactorums, refineries, crackling plasma reactors and laboratories, test ranges, chemical vats, gene bays. The engines of these vessels are larger than the full mass of most existing starships. So just their engines are the size of most starships.
They probably got to be
big.
It's a generational ship, Marky, right there.
I'm gonna have to redo the art on the Dirge of Eternity now. I think it needs an Arc Mechanicus. Lost Archaeo technology, STCs, and Archaeo tech hunting. Hive cities organically grow, often clustered around some dense pocket of either a natural resource that was deemed valuable by the original colonies or a power source. Whether that's the rich mineral deposit or some source of immediate and easy to get to geothermal power, eventually the needs of the megacity either drive it to expand further underground as it expands ever upward and outward. Atoma Prime from Darktide is an example of the colony ship landed on this super dense pocket of mineral resource, and they drilled down, they mined down, and eventually tapped into geothermal power. In theory, that's why a lot of the cities started clustering around that, because there's this massive power source and there's this dense, rich area. One of the things that we don't really talk about a lot in 40K, but it's important to kind of look at when you talk about science and science fiction, the basis of science fiction, which is the actual science, is Imperium is probably a type 1 civilization in decline rather than approaching a type 1 civilization. So a type 1 civilization on the, what is it, the Kardashev scale? Kardashev, thank you. On the Kardashev scale is a civilization that is capable of harvesting all of the natural resources of its star. So all power...
It's not natural, it's energy.
Energy, yes.
But energy implies that you can master all physical material within your solar system as well.
Right. So we have to think of the Empire, the Imperium, in that way, especially the Stellar Exodus Imperium. So these guys knew that geothermal power was important. They knew that solar was important. They're going to know that wind is important. They're going to use all of the technology that they can to generate power. However, geothermal and fusion are some of the most powerful methods of energy that we know about now. So it's kind of safe to assume, and in a lot of the artwork that depicts Hive cities, it's shown that a lot of Hive cities are based around geothermal pockets, and whether or not they made those pockets by drilling down or whether or not those existed, it's just keep in mind. Another way to look at this is much like the highly valued and dense urbanized settlements of the 18th and 19th centuries here on Earth have new layers of the town or city that are often built right on top of the bones of a much older city. As an example, there are many cities in Europe where there are Roman ruins, which can be found in the subways or underneath the subways of existing cities. Examples are Rome, in Italy. There's other Italian cities that have the same thing. London has Roman ruins just underneath its surface level, or how cities like Seattle have slowly sunk into the marshlands it is built upon to create a dense undercity. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Seattle and Atlanta is another city, actually. Both have underground. They have underground cities. And that's not because we built a city and then decided, hey, it'd be kitschy to put an underground city in there. It's literally because as the city expanded, the weight of the city drove it underground. And because now the city was underground, what we did as humans was we just built a new city on level ground again, which means right on top of the old city.
Venice is sinking, and they're kind of doing the same thing.
Yep.
And
we just build
New Orleans
right on top.
essentially is gonna. It's like halfway in that process.
So hives are the same way. They're just on a huge, much bigger scale.
And Gotham City in the DC universe, not our universe, but
although that doesn't so much go down as goes up.
It goes up, but the way they basically like seal off the lower levels as they go
makes it feel very Hive City.
Which is, and it's very much like Coruscant or any of the other megapolis.
And
Cumanopolis. Yeah.
I think Fifth Element would be another good example.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everything's like super sealed up, kind of. If it's like, not enclosed entirely, it's so narrow it might as well be.
I'm going down to cloud level.
We'll get there.
What the hell's below cloud level? Jesus.
Just like in our world, just like in the real world, hives also hide secrets that have been lost. But in this case, instead of a couple of decades or a couple of centuries, under thousands of years of these layered new structures. Hive cities are also massively heavy, and as a new layer of the city is added up top, mostly as the resources or production needs are expanded, the layers they are built on sink. Sometimes this is on a geologically slow scale. Other times it's in these super massive violent shifts, with entire districts sinking tens of hundreds of feet in a few hours or even minutes. Sometimes the weight is moving it down a couple of inches a year. You're not really going to feel that. Or if you do, it's like a little tiny shift, like your house groans sort of thing. However, in lore, especially in Hive Primus on Necromunda, every once in a while there's a hive quake and a whole fucking section drops several hundred feet. That's just what happens.
That's awesome.
Yeah. In these cases, since the majority of the city survives, humans just do what we do. We rebuild, usually right on top of whatever just fell down. It's gone. Cool.
Sounds like you're talking about Skaven.
Yeah. Doesn't it, though? While the lore isn't entirely clear, sometime during the Age of Strife, many worlds were consumed by generationally long civil wars, some of which probably saw entire megacities and hives either completely uninhabited or partially destroyed. Although at some point people either moved back in and rebuilt. Whatever the case, these conflicts interrupted the chain of custody, good record keeping needed for, or the dynastic control over the location of many of the technological wonders of the Dark Age of technology, including the STCs. These wars interrupted the general flow. And if your house controlled the STC and your entire bloodline is wiped out by the rival bloodline, and then as the rival bloodline is moving in, the peasantry rose up and overthrew them. And then because the peasantry overthrew them, the noble houses in the cities outside came in to overthrow the peasantry. And by the time it's all done,
you have a feudal world.
Whoever's in charge doesn't even fucking know what an STC is or where it is. They don't know what it is. They don't know where it is. It's just completely gone. So as Hive cities were rebuilt or expanded upon, many of these secrets, treasures, and wonders were forced ever downward, hidden as much by hundreds of layers of the city as by hundreds of layers of myth and legend.
Yeah, that's awesome because there's feudal worlds.
Yeah.
So what happened to their ship? Where the hell is it? Because everything's stone.
That's actually covered in a little bit of, or hinted at a little bit in Night World lore. Night Worlds would choose to be feudal, at least to keep their peasantry that way forever. Whether or not that's because it's a balance of agriculture and world needs, or whether or not that's because of power, is kind of left unclear, or whether or not it's because of both. Night Worlds control their populations, and they kind of balance the equilibrium of their planets to stay in a feudal pre-industrial age continuously. However, another thing that's hinted about in Night World lore is that sometimes you landed on a planet because you were out of space juice and you were out of space supplies, so you had to land. You were out of Sour Patch Kids, so we're pulling over. And that planet just didn't have a lot of iron. So you don't have a lot of steel, but you got a fuck ton of rock and you got a fuck ton of land for agriculture. So everything's stone, or, you know, however you look at it. Because an STC, and this gets back to Marky's poop helmet joke, an STC doesn't necessarily take poop and make it into wood. An STC takes poop,
Adobe,
and makes it into Adobe bricks. It refines it to a point while keeping the basics of whatever it was, essentially. In that case, probably turns it into food.
It makes
fertilizer.
Things. It doesn't change what it's made out of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it probably does to a certain extent. Again, if you dump raw iron into it, it's probably going to spit out steel.
Right, which is still iron, in a way. But it's not.
Right.
It's not going to take dirt and turn dirt into,
gold. Yeah. It's not an alchemy machine. If you throw people into it, you don't get.
You get Soylent Green.
You don't get a one-armed, one-legged child.
You get Soylent
world,
Green,
man. Yeah, you get Soylent Green. Oh man, that's a dark piece of lore. Colony ship that landed on a planet that was so low in resources, they eventually had to start throwing bodies into the STC to get stuff back.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's like Dwarf Fortress, where if you play Dwarf Fortress for long enough, your cat population has led to the fact that all of your dwarfs are in cat armor. Cat bone armor with cat bone weapons, selling cat bone trinkets.
Oh, that's awesome.
The Dwarf Fortress is a crazy game. Yeah, so generally speaking, a hive is vertically separated into 4 major zones. At the top is the upper hive. This area is generally above the pollution-heavy cloud layer that covers the world. Also, in these same general terms, this is where the elite of the hive live. Its topmost levels and spires extend into the thinnest of the world's atmosphere, scraping the very edge of space. Rich merchants who maintain close ties to their space docks, noble houses whose dynastic wealth keeps them above all others, and the most senior of the Imperium's administratum call this region their home. While this is not always the case, notably in the Eisenhorn series, one of his estates is deep down in a hive, where it has access to the unspoiled deep ocean of the planet it's on, with these massive glass windows that allow him, while he's entertaining and eating, to look out on the underwater beauty of the world. So it doesn't always happen to be the upper hive, but in general, the upper hive, it's the haves and the have-nots, the people who live up above are rich.
The hills and the valleys.
Yep. So Marky, one of your favorite pieces of hive-related tech comes from the upper hives.
I was just about to talk about having a underwater room or area.
Right.
Fuck that shit, dude. I've seen Deep Blue Sea. I know what happens when you start fucking around underwater, and that. Nah, I ain't having it. But to speak on, the haves and the have-nots.
But Marky's all like, fuck that movie, The Meg.
Digital weapons. So when I first started playing 40k, I believe it was like 4th or 5th edition, Vulcan, I believe he had digital weapons. And I was like, the fuck is a digital weapon? And I just assumed at the time that it was like the literal word. I guess it is a literal word.
You expected it was the technological use of digital, as in.
I was like, oh, it's like a little drone.
Ones and zeros. Yeah,
it's like a little drone that flies around that shoots you or something. No, digital weapons. It uses it in the literal sense, as in your digits, as in your fingers, or like handheld
ring.
Exactly. So digital weapons are like little, and they kind of work like, what do you call them? Grimoires. Most of the time, they're a one-time use or like it needs to recharge after being used one time. Is it a grimoire?
Yeah.
Is that the word?
Grimoire is a book. It's like a magic item.
It's like a scroll.
But a grimoire you can only use once. Is that a scroll then?
Yeah, you're talking about
you can
scrolls.
only learn from once.
No,
so I guess it would be like a scroll, right?
Books teach you things. Scrolls are like one-off spells.
Yeah. Well, like in a D&D sense, a grimoire or a tome is going to teach you the spell, and you're going to be able to teach the spell to other people. A scroll is going to have an activation.
Okay, so it would be more like a scroll then. So like it's a fireball scroll essentially. Yeah. It's a one-time use, or like it needs to recharge after a while. But these are small weapons that you basically put on your fingers, or it's like a glove. It's something that you like. It's exactly like jewelry, and they're
usually ridiculously powerful.
Yeah, so they have the same power as a full-size weapon, but it's a one-time punch. So like it's like having a Infernus pistol on your finger essentially.
Yeah,
it's like having a Derringer.
Same exact. No. So it packs the punch of a full-size weapon. So it's like
you can use it like a Derringer. Is what I mean.
Right.
I think one of the inquisitorial band of Ravener has a digital weapon that's essentially a Hot Shaw's Las, but it's a Hot Shaw's Las pistol he can use once.
Yeah,
it takes like 48 hours to recharge or whatever.
Right, exactly.
There was a
last ditch thing.
Rogue Trader story that I was reading a long time ago that was actually pretty cool. And Rogue Trader obviously was loaded because he had more than one of these things. And he was sitting there having a negotiation with some planetary noble, something or other. And he was trying to decide if the negotiations were like going poorly, in which they did. And he was like, do I scramble his brain or do I just kill him? And he was literally like, as he was doing it, he's like rolling his fingers in his lap and he's like, which one of my rings do I fire off at this guy?
Like fucking Thanos. Like Thanos, but exactly. It's a one-time use.
So Vulcan had more than one of them? Sorry, Kev.
What I was going to say, it was cool because like, and it's not like we're all talking like weapons, but like I was saying, one of them literally was just going to scramble his brain and make him forget the last like 48 hours.
Yeah. Yeah,
like they're not all straight up just like laser beam kill people. They can they're all kinds of nonsense. And it was the idea, I'm guessing, is, in the Golden Age, it was, every now and then you might need something really tiny, undetectable,
Right.
That's just one-time use, like a piece of jewelry for personal defense.
I like Marky's connection to like role-playing games because that feels very apt. Like they're scrolls or one-time use wands. Like it's a utility thing that's going to get you out of hot water.
It's like the transfer scroll in Goblin Slayer, but he uses it the wrong way.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, very very similar
connected to the bottom of the ocean. Or like opens it up one time and it just burns away.
Yeah, or like a teleportation crystal. Like you can only once you use it, it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah, and not all of them.
That's what you're looking for. Consumable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some kind of consumable.
So either a consumable or like a rechargeable consumable that like, I guess it's not a consumable.
It's your grenade slot.
If you're a sharpshooter,
yeah.
So,
grenade slot.
So Vulcan had more than one, is what you're saying?
I believe in 4th or 5th edition, he had like 2 digital weapons or multiple digital weapons that essentially gave him extra attacks at his own strength instead of at his like ×2 for his spear or whatever the spear was.
Oh yeah.
But he had those extra digital weapons as extra attacks, kind of like the what do you call them? The Admech have them. They have, it's not servo arms, but they have like
mechadendrites.
The mechadendrites.
Yeah, mechadendrites. Which are essentially like the extra little arms that come out of that shift out of their ass or whatever, right?
Yeah, out of their yeah. They don't have an ass anymore.
Out of an orifice.
Well, where their ass would have been, that's where their mechadendrites come from.
The flesh is weak, Marky. There is no more thick ass.
The waste comes from somewhere, so there is definitely a waste depository hole, which means they have an asshole.
They have a waste depository hole.
Yeah, it's not a traditional asshole.
And I'm sure somebody would still stick a finger in there.
What do you think comes out of the center of the mechadendrite where that hole is?
That's their digital one.
I feel like it would come out like a little dice cube, it would be like a little cube that comes out, and he's just
like
like
little pellets.
Yeah, he's like, I shat today, and then he'd like throw it to like the peasants. Like, here you go.
It's like the little baby octopus in Finding Nemo. Oh, I inked myself. So
it's like that little cube comes out, and he like tells the peasant, "Yeah, put it in the microwave thing," and it turns into like a turkey, and the peasant's just eating the turkey leg.
Right, but it's actually just mechanic as shit.
Chicken good. That's all I can think of now is the fucking balls that turn into chicken good. So speaking of the upper hives obviously have a bunch of defense batteries on them, which is a good place to bring up at least the larger version of one of Chuck's favorite weapons that's associated with the hive, the las cannon.
Are you talking about the orbital las defense cannons?
Yeah, all that.
Las cannon.
And they get smaller. You can carry them around personally too. But yeah, hit us with some las cannon goodness.
Oh, thing about las cannon I think is amazing. This is just a giant laser beam that melts everything. Space Marines love them.
Yep. Yeah, carry one around on their shoulder.
They can carry it on the shoulder. They can put it on their dreadnoughts. They can take knights down with it. They take everything down with it. It's so amazing to watch them have it. And game wise, right now, it's still multiple wounds. It's a -3, -3 or -4. I think it's -3. It's like game wise, Marky will tell you, I've only recently not had them. Typically, every time I've ever played with my Marines, there are las cannons.
I love las cannons in game.
Well, they have las fusils now. You're primarisized.
Yep. Yeah. The crazy ass sniper rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just love
Speaking
las
of,
cannons.
there is an Imperial Fist chapter house in Hive Primus on Necromunda.
Well, yeah, because they recruit from Necromunda.
Yep. It's in the Spire.
One of the
it's the top of the Spire, actually.
Official recruiting places.
So moving down, the next layer we get into is the mid-hive. This region is within the uppermost reaches of the polluted cloud cover that covers the world. While this can make being outside uncomfortable, it would be more comparable to an incredibly smoggy day with a chance of nicer, clearer weather from time to time. The mid-hive is where the minor houses, powerful inner hive merchants, and what could be considered the middle class live. Generally, they are dominated by the most powerful hive gangs, which have become minor noble houses in their own right. They're no longer called gangs at that point. They're called houses. This is also the region where the bulk of the Imperium employees will live and work. It contains most of the manufactorums and work areas for most of the hive. So as to where a high administratum official is going to live up in the upper hive, the bulk of the administratum is going to be in the mid-hive. There's going to be locations in the underhive, in the lower hive, and in the upper hive for the administratum, but the people, like the work, the office building work, so to speak, the bureaucracy is going to be in the mid-hive. But probably the most important part of the mid-hive is it is where the houses are. So if you are familiar with Necromunda, you've got the various houses with the exception of Cawdor. They are all pretty much represented somewhere in the mid-hives. They're that powerful. They control that much wealth. They're not quite upper hive, but they're no longer underhivers.
Probably a better place to be.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Can't make it to the top, but you can settle for
midway there.
Yeah.
Second's okay.
It's a participation trophy kind of area.
You only got one person shitting on you above, not two.
Or 1 million.
It's less.
Less shit. Always good.
Less shit's always good. The flow's downhill.
The mid-hives are going to have some of the crazier, higher levels of technology of the stuff that you're going to see in the underhives. So auto guns are going to be relatively common. An auto gun is essentially a mass-produced projectile weapon, and they're described as having a weapon, an ammunition round somewhere between the caliber of a AK-47 and a 50 Action Express. So it's somewhere between 7.76 and 50 caliber AE. Probably not quite as crazy as a lot of people think it is. A lot of people assume that they're right underneath a bolter. A bolter essentially fires a miniature rocket, and I think a bolter
75
is
caliber.
The human ones are 78 caliber. The marine ones are 98 caliber. They're huge.
That's the Emperor's blessing coming to you.
Yeah,
Bless.
Is the Sisters of Battle bolter, is that more equivalent to like the smaller round bolter? I forgot what they call it. The something pattern.
It's
Sororitas
not the
pattern.
yeah, I can't remember what theirs is.
No, it's something like that.
Theirs is specifically
It's
patterned for
in
them.
between.
Yeah.
It's probably an in between.
Yeah,
Because
it's got to be designed for use with power armor, but it's not obviously Space Marine sized.
So the Guardsman bolter, is that smaller than a normal like standard Space Marine bolter?
Guardsmen carry
Supposed
the
to be.
78 caliber. If a guardsman has a bolter or a bolt pistol, it's the 78 caliber.
So like Yarick, he has like a smaller caliber bolt pistol.
Actually, I believe Yarick was wielding a storm bolter that is Space Marine sized, but I'm not 100% positive.
Oh,
yeah,
that's right. He had a storm
Yarick
bolter.
has
that's right.
crazy. Yeah, Yarick has his own crazy crap. The bolt gun
But if I
also
remember
commonly
right,
referred
he
to.
grabbed it off. He like looted it off the battlefield. If I remember right.
That's tactically acquired, Kevin.
I'm sorry. The standard bolter of the Adaptus Astartes and the Adaptus Sororitas is the 75 caliber bolter.
Yeah, I was gonna say I believe the 75 caliber is the normal bolter and the 98's the heavy bolter.
Yeah, 98's the heavy bolter.
Yeah, that's what I
the new
thought, but I
one.
wasn't sure.
That'd be the new bolt rifle, right?
There is a smaller caliber bolter for commissars and guardsmen that's like 68. It's essentially
It's
there's
a
an
musket
Action
ball.
Express. Just like there's 50 cal and then there's 50 cal Action Express, there's bolter and then there's bolter Action Express.
Bolter and bolter human.
Yeah. The one that won't break your collarbone just by pulling the trigger.
Right. But Sororitas can use a normal bolter because they're in power
Armor.
I know they carry a like Rosarius pattern or something.
Yeah, they have their own pattern. A lot of the chapters have their own patterns too. And then there's even patterns based on your armor pattern. So if you're old enough, you have a completely different pattern. But essentially the point is an auto gun is a projectile weapon in our current firearms convention.
Yep.
Yeah. And they're described as being between essentially an AK-47 and a 50 caliber handgun as far as, or a 50 caliber auto gun.
It's the Godwin pattern bolter. That's what it is. The Godwin Diaz pattern bolt.
That's the smaller one.
That's what the Sisters of Battle use.
Interesting. Is that current lore or is that older lore?
Looks more current.
When we hit Imperium lore and Sisters lore, we'll dig into bolters and bolter technology with more official.
Yeah, right.
Pre looking into it.
Yeah.
Not winging it.
Not a how do they compare to auto guns?
They are better.
Auto guns are used pretty extensively in the mid-hives. The other weapon that's kind of cool that comes from this area is the Arbites shotgun. And the Arbites shotgun, it carries a special round, which is essentially heat-seeking and directed. So it's a shotgun round, like it's a shotgun shell. You didn't know that?
I didn't know they had smart bullets for the Arbites.
They do. So the Arbites can go... What does Dredd say? Hot shot round.
Yep.
He shoots it and the dude like burns from the inside. But the Arbites essentially have some Arbites have a smart round that changes based on their needs. That's why that new model of Arbites that has the shotgun that has the silencer and the fucking scope on it, and everybody's like, why the fuck is there a silencer and scope on a shotgun? It's because it's firing a special round that seeks the target. So that scope locks
up on
in
somebody.
Yeah, that scope locks in on the Arbites target, and then he fires. He marks it in his scope, and then he fires his shotgun round. And this miniature version of a bolter shell, essentially,
hot shot round,
comes out and goes and finds his target. So those are pretty neat too.
Ass blaster round.
I can't remember.
What does that one do?
It's It's like the six stick. Have you ever heard of the six stick?
Yeah, it was from Kick-Ass. Yeah.
The ass blaster round is the same thing, except instead of coming out, no, it's the same thing. It's just this bullet hits you, and it's like a sandbag round. It planks off, and you just overwhelmingly have to find a restroom.
Oh God.
It's like Randy in that one episode of South Park where he can't leave he's got the trash can in the bathroom. He can't leave either.
You ever see, I think it was like Three Ninjas. What is it? Like, there's like these dudes that like go in their house and they're going to rob them. They have like pizza and soda and shit, like all lined up, and they put laxatives in the soda. So like the robbers like came in, ate their pizza, drank their soda, and the dude's about to shit himself. Three Ninjas, right? Yeah. And,
yeah, that's a movie that existed back when we were kids. Yes.
Yeah. I was like, did I say that right? Three Ninjas. And like the dude's about to shit himself, and the kid's about to kick him, and he's just like, "Oh, not the stomach, not the stomach!" And he kicks him in the stomach, and he lands on the toilet and shits himself.
That sounds terrible.
It's pretty great.
Oh man, Three Ninjas is I would say classic, but it's not a classic. Three Ninjas is a movie.
It is a movie, yes.
It is definitely...
It exists.
A movie. So next up, going with our verticality scale, we have the Underhive. This region is under the densest and most poisonous cloud cover that exists on the world. Exposure to the pollution levels outside the hive at these levels can cause permanent damage in minutes, mutation, and even death in under an hour. Not that people don't live on the surface of these worlds outside the hives, though. There are people who live in the wastes, and whether or not that's because there's area of the wastes that are pollution less dense enough that you can survive, or whether or not they've adapted to living in those regions, or whether or not they are Mad Maxers with gas masks on all the time isn't necessarily explained. It changes from hive world to hive world. The Underhive also extends several hundred levels into the world's surface. Not only do these deep foundations help to anchor and support the weight of the hive, but they are actually the old upper reaches of whatever the megacity used to be, back when the tallest building was under a couple of hundred floors or so. Again, as we mentioned up top, these old cities, think of the Viz Khalif. What's that big ass building in Dubai called, Kevin?
Believe it or not, I don't know that one.
Anyway, there's this big ass building in Dubai that looks like a hive city. It looks like a miniature hive city. So, if you start off with a 100-story building and then you want to make the 100-story building 200 stories, you're going to make it a little bit wider and a little bit taller. And then when you mount it 300 stories, a little bit wider, a little bit taller, et cetera, ad nauseum for hundreds of years. So the Underhive has...
on that project.
What's up?
I'd hate to be an engineer on that project.
Right. Chuck, you had brought up Fifth Element earlier. So an Underhive is essentially what's underneath cloud cover.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it extends underground. And the reason it extends underground is not because the city was planned that way. It's literally because, if you were to build a version of New York on top of New York Island, the weight of that second version of New York would push the original New York 50 to 60 feet underground slowly, right? So then you put a third New York on top of those two, and that original New York has been pushed down another 150 feet into the ground. And then you put another New York on top of it, and that original New York is now 300 to 400 feet underground.
Almost like a iceberg.
Right. Every time they go up a little bit, or every time they go up by a magnitude of order, the city underneath gets pushed down a little bit. If you are a member of our Patreon, you can see some of the images that we've been looking at. And in the particular image that I have pulled up that's of Hive Primus on Necromunda, this is an entire city with skyscrapers that's underneath the ground. The entire ancient city has been pushed down under the ground. If you're not a member of our Patreon, just Google pictures of Hive Cities and start looking through them. You'll see several examples of this. It's very common. As much as that's the case, these are also foundations. The hive has to anchor itself. So there has to be foundational elements. There has to be that engineering, as Marky said, underneath as well, that keeps the city from collapsing upon itself and becoming a super dense black hole, which wouldn't happen, but it's funny to say. This is where the poor live. Your menial workers, those who are out of work, those lost to the Administratum's ability to even record their existence. These are often lawless or 100% in control of the gangs and criminal underworld that controls them. Underhives are tangles of unmappable cityscapes, perfect for hiding criminals, witches, mutants, and worse. The Underhive is, in my opinion, the most interesting, most exciting part of a Hive City. And the reason is because you get to play with those dystopian images of urban sprawls that exist in cyberpunk fiction now. If you've seen the movie Elysium, with Matt Damon, where they've got the body armor suits, the exoskeleton suits.
Exoskeletons.
Yeah. Just picture the city that he lives on Earth, but underground.
Yeah.
That's an undercity. And it allows for a lot of interesting storytelling elements, which is why we have fashioned as a group, as a podcast, have fashioned most of Innsmouth Hive's lore centered around different parts of the Underhive. We have our 4 major gangs that we talk about being Underhive gangs. We do have houses. We do have mid-hive gangs as well. But the majority of the stuff we drip out to you guys, the majority of the stuff that we talk about is all Underhive stuff. And it's because of this cool, dense area.
It's the craziness that can happen and ensue in it is why. Because the higher up you go, you know what's happening. It's Administratum.
Yeah.
Mechanicus.
Yeah, there's Arbites on every corner.
It's the fancy house and the governor on top with all the ships and all the cool stuff in the stories.
Yeah. It's the guardsman story versus the Adaptus.
Drugs, sex, and rock and roll.
That's
versus the Adaptus Astartes hero that's like lauded on every world. You know, that at a certain point, as cool as the heroes are, they're cool because they're heroes, as to where the lowly guardsman is cool because of the possibility of where his story can go.
It's the difference between the Skywalker saga and Andor. Like, if you take it like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Take it down low. Take it to the dude who literally doesn't have any rank, doesn't work for any organization. The dude who's just trying to exist. That guy's story.
Yep. And that's what's cool about the Underhives too, because there's stuff in stories, especially with the Inquisition, part of their groups. It's like people from the Underhive. That's what's neat all the time. A lot of the stories, like nobody comes from the Upper Hive. All this stuff, they're all Underhivers.
Yeah, because the Underhive is the place that chews you up and spits out the parts. So if you survive, you're worth something.
Yep.
So that brings up one of my and Marky's favorite little pieces of technology that claims the Hive as a home: stub weapons. So stub weapons are a lot like auto guns, except stub weapons are the ones that you can make at home on your own workbench, and they might fire a solid round projectile, or they might explode in your hand.
It's like the what is it? The pipe pistol,
the pipe rifle
series of weapons from Fallout. Yep.
Yeah, like a bolt action pistol. You're like, yeah, take that, you super mutant. And you're like, oh shit, that's not stopping them.
And stub guns either fire homemade projectiles, so you've got to manufacture the ammunition that's shot from, or they're built to chamber whatever caliber the auto guns fire. But again, you're taking your
I chamber mine in double-sided dildo.
you're taking your chances when you fire one.
Yeah, you are.
Especially it's double-sided.
The best example I have of this from my real life, I used to work on a ranch, and we had a guy who worked on the ranch who had his own shotgun, and this was his shotgun, and only he would use his shotgun. And it was literally a lead pipe that it was 2 lead pipes that he had welded together and reinforced. And I think he had like electroplated or something on the outside. And then it was breech open, but it was homemade engineering breech open. And he literally had those. I don't know if you guys remember those old cap guns where you pulled back that like heavy iron thing and it would go forward and hit the cap. So he had taken that mechanism, from like an old like flintlock style cap gun from like the late 80s or late 70s, early 80s, like the toys. And he had reverse engineered it and bulked it up so that it acted to hit the firing pin on the shotgun, on normal shotgun shells. That right there is a stub gun.
I love it.
Or a gun made out of toilet parts. You know, if you've ever seen a documentary about the worst prisons and the worst prison riots in the world, which come out every once in a while, I'm sure there's one on Netflix right now. There's going to be some point at some way where some corrections officer is like, and then we found an Uzi made out of toilet parts in so-and-so's cell. And they show this thing, and you're like, that's definitely a gun. And it's definitely made out of toilet parts.
And it's probably just as dangerous to the guy holding it.
Yep.
You're like, that's a pipe bomb. That's
exactly.
No shotgun.
Exactly. Like that is a hazard to my health, sir. That is not a weapon.
They're down there printing it with their 3D printers.
Those are the ones, those are the real dangers, you know. You don't want to roll a 1 when you have that.
The funny thing is what you just said, Chuck, is stub guns go the gambit from I slapped a couple of pieces together. It has a firing pin. There's a trigger motion that happens. Perfectly honest, the function of the gun, not the function of the ammunition, the function of the gun, if it is a single fire weapon, the engineering is actually pretty simple. It's a spring catch release that hits a charge, which goes bang. It's about as difficult. Yeah, it's spring loading a hammer.
Yeah.
The mechanic. Now the making it fire in semi-automatic, the timing everything together so it functions the way that we picture a modern firearm working. Everything else is much more complicated. But the act of like using a spring to release something under tension is relatively simple engineering. But stub guns go that gambit from I've shoved a 50 caliber round into a single fire pistol to I have a semi-automatic handgun that was manufactured on a metal 3D printer that takes a standardized ammo that I can find all over the Underhive.
Have you seen that little video clip of a guy that like, it's like a break, what do you call it? Like a break action, like a single shot pistol.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes it looks like a Derringer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he takes like a 50 cal round and shoves it down the barrel. And at the end of it, it's all you hear is a moan.
Yes.
It's like stretching the barrel open as they put the 50 cal around it. It's like a little 3D render, but it's just fucking hilarious. You just hear, oh.
There is a single fire competition pistol that was made by like engineered by somebody that fits 50 cal full round ammo in it. And I've seen the dude fire it and like, why would you do that to your wrist? It is a full 50 cal round. It is not an Action Express round. It looks like the old NES light pistol. Like that's the look of it because it's weird and long. That's where I thought Marky was going until he said, and then the barrel stretched. I'm like, that's not where he's going.
It stretched and moaned, and then he closes the break and shoots it, and it just explodes. Pretty great.
That's pretty funny.
Like the tip of the bullet extends past the barrel. That's how much larger the bullet was.
That's pretty fucking funny, dude. So yeah, stub guns are pretty cool. And again, they can go the gambit from I made it with toilet parts and pipes to
this was a couple guns I slapped together.
I know the engineering and I've made a small production facility. And a lot of times when you come across stub guns in pistols, specifically in the 40k lore, they'll have a name attached to them, and it's a small manufactorum name. I believe in the Eisenhorn, Ravener, Bequin series, the full Inquisition series, if you will, there's a brand called like Theta 7 that's talked about a bunch, and that's a stub gun. It's just a stub gun that's perfected and massively produced. It carries a ridiculously large round. It has a very, very small capacity. I think it's like 6 or 7 shots, but it's the type of thing that gangers and hive toughs use when they need to end an argument real fast.
Yeah, the stub gun in particular that I like is called a stub cannon. And think of it as like a hand cannon. So it's just like a huge, like 6-shot revolver, but it's like what do you call it?
Dirty Harry's gun.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was trying to think of the actor's name.
It's meant
Clint
to
Eastwood.
put it down.
Thank you. Yeah. It's like Clint Eastwood gun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The stub cannon.
Or the stub cannon I like a lot. I can't remember which gang it is, but one of the Necromunda Underhive gangs. It's a piece of art that's relatively old. It's a breach break stub cannon. So like you break it open and you put like one bolter shell into it essentially, and then you close it, and you've got one shot.
That's in
Jesus,
the Rogue Trader, or not Rogue Trader. I'm looking at the Rogue Trader rule book. Like is
it in one of the? Is it
in the Dark
RPGs?
Heresy one? It specifically has a picture of the one you're talking about. It literally, it's fucking huge, and the concept you literally like load it, and it's probably like wielding a cock gun as a handgun.
Oh yeah, no, it's ridiculous. I want to say the original like sketch that I'm picturing in my head is like from Confrontation, which was the game that became Necromunda.
Yeah,
it's an old sketch.
Do you remember the name of the gun that you start out with in Dark Tide as the Ogre, Kevin? It's like it's that single shot like
as the Ogre.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it's just a breech loaded shotgun.
Thump gun.
The thump gun.
Yeah.
Does it go stump?
That's a stub cannon.
Yeah, essentially.
That's a stub cannon.
I mean, fires a grenade, but yeah.
Another cool bit of tech that the Underhive is going to use, the Midhive and the Underhive is going to use, and we're going to bring up a house specifically now, is House Goliath. And this is more on the technology side. They use genetic manipulation and combat drugs to make Goliaths bigger. And Goliaths are actually their own subspecies of abhuman, by the way. But you can make a human, a Goliath, over a certain amount of time, or you can make a human as big as Goliath over a certain amount of time. So you've got that whole thing. And these are guys that are approaching Ogren toughness and strength. And what they're really known for is the close combat weapons, power axes, power mauls. And these are things that aren't chain weapons, and they're not necessarily the power axes, or they're not necessarily the power swords of the nobility. So you don't have this like almost.
They're not as elegant.
Yeah, they're not as elegant at all.
They're not pinky up.
Right.
Power swords are essentially plasma swords. They're lightsabers, if you will. Eisenhorn has one at one point, and he replaces it with a more modern power sword that we know of.
Monomolecular.
Speaking of,
Eisenhorn has a hilt with a button on it, and until you activate the button stud, the plasma blade is not there. It is legitimately a lightsaber. And those were original power swords. Those were Dark Age of Technology power swords. Now the nobility has very nice ornate swords
with power
that they hit a button and it puts a power field around it. The Hive has, we attached a couple of batteries to the blade, so when I hit you with it, it shocks you too.
Yep.
Attached a bunch of batteries to a piece of rebar, and I got myself a power.
While we were getting to that, I found the excerpt from the tabletop RPGs on the stub hand cannon.
Okay.
So a variant of the stub gun is the huge hand cannon, used mostly by enforcers or bounty hunters who aren't picky on the state of their quarry. These weapons kick with a strong recoil, and unless used with two hands or a recoil glove, impose a -10 penalty on ballistic skill tests.
It's the China Lake grenade launcher.
I like that, a recoil glove.
Yeah, you can get things that allow you to fire like two-handed weapons, one-handed, and stuff like that.
I call mine the Wristbreaker 9000.
Yep, and it's like the it's funny because like the handle is like it's like a las gun or like a las pistol like grip, and then like just this
It's just all barrel.
chunk on top of it.
It's just all barrel with the handle. Yeah.
It's the M79 breech-loaded grenade launcher
with a pistol grip.
Again,
yeah, exactly.
Again, bringing us back to Terminator 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
The 203 can't go wrong. Oh, I guess Terminator 3. He used the cycling one. I forgot what it's called, like an M18.
Oh yeah, the drum-fed M11 something or other.
M114 or some shit like that.
So the last level of the Hive is called the Sump. These are the oldest foundations of the Hive. This area is a completely lawless region and 100% the domain of the most renegade or insane. Cults often hide out in the Sump. The Sump is unpredictably unstable, with cave-ins, sinkholes, hive quakes, and even the very shifting crust of the world rearranging the Sump at will. It makes them the most inhospitable of regions to live in and almost impossible to map in entirety. However, it is the Sump that might contain the biggest prize of a Hive city. It could be what's hiding an STC. So exploring the Sump is dangerous in the extreme. Not only is the Hive and the world itself trying to kill you, but renegades, mutants, death and cannibal cultists, monsters, and even Xenos hunt throughout the Sump. Not to mention other treasure hunters who might just have more firepower and less ethical restraint than you do. But the Sump can be a huge temptation and even a necessary evil. Sub-Hive power stations, control nodes, and even monitoring stations might exist deep within the Sump that have to be manned by Administratum personnel. The Sump might also contain ancient subways or cave systems that connect many hives of the world. But it also hides lost tech vaults, entire libraries of lost Administratum records, and possibly even ancient mansions and estates that no record even exists for anymore. If it was lost in the Age of Strife and the Hive is old enough, it might just be hidden somewhere down in the Sump, waiting to be found. And this is probably one of the more unique storytelling kernels that comes from Hive worlds. The Sump is whatever is left of the city. And it is, we described the Sump in Innsmouth
of the Hive.
We described the Sump in Innsmouth as being this massive kind of like toxic lake that has these fungi forests growing all over it.
It's like a bilge.
Yeah. And then in that area, you just might have an entire mansion complex or an entire office building or a vast university complex that's just fucking lost. Think of any Americana horror setting where there's like some lost mansion or lost university or whatever out in a swamp or out in a bayou. And it's just out there. That could be in the middle of this Sump.
The insane asylum in the middle of the swamp, in the middle of the woods.
Exactly. Like just out there. But it could also be an entire fucking chunk of the colony ship. There could be a battle barge under, it landed for some reason and got fucking crushed and hidden or lost or it crashed. The Sump is just full of
everything.
And because of that, not only do you get the possibility of SDCs and all this lost knowledge, but it also gives you a very, very interesting, very compelling story setting for vault hunters, archaeotech hunters, bounty hunters. Criminals are running down here too, so you're going to have people chasing them.
I'm surprised the Mechanicum isn't going system to system and just like, here's 4 regiments of Skitarii. We're marching into the Sump.
So sometimes the Mechanicum does do that, especially if they think there's something there. But more often than not, the risk reward of fighting through the Underhive is not worth it. Because the Underhive will react like a military. Right?
Yeah,
as fractured as the gangs are.
Go full Black Hawk Down bad stuff.
I mean, that's why I'm just surprised if the SDCs are so important, the old tech's so important, why that's not like happening all over
it
the
takes
place.
a lot to mobilize that. Also, that would piss off whatever local planetary governor is there if the mechanic has just showed up and was like, we're taking your shit.
And there's no guarantee that it's down there. There's absolutely no guarantee that it exists in the Sump.
Maybe that would be a good creative writing thing. Is that planetary governor has decided he's done with it.
Yeah. It's the city of gold. It's the lost city of gold, essentially. You know, like it might exist. The majority of people
like
don't believe it. Yeah. The majority of people don't believe it exists at the end of the day. They don't actually think there's anything down there. But there is sometimes. Yeah. And it's happened before.
That would be interesting. I think it's like, oh, you know, I'm the planetary governor. I'm on this planet. I'm sick of the hive. I'm mobilizing everything. I'm cleaning everything out down below to expand everything now.
Nah, they're gonna want to sit on their ass and eat grapes, dude. They're not gonna.
It all depends. See, that's the thing. It all depends. Again, like we were talking, it all depends on the writer and the story.
Yeah. In general,
probably 60% of them are like, I want to eat grapes.
In general, though, like depending on how the hive is set up, and with the general build of dystopian haves and have-nots, which is very much how Hive Cities are lorically based, that the idea is all of the people who live in the mid-hives and in the underhive are a resource to be spent by the wealthy. The wealthy aren't so much interested in staying above it as they are in controlling that resource. So you can't keep your factories running unless you can sacrifice 400 people a day to them. And you can't sacrifice 400 people a day to them unless you have ultra poor people who are willing to do shitty jobs like climb into unstable reactors to reset pins. And that's how the noble houses think. It's like a Snowpiercer. We need kids that can climb into the engine. I was literally
just about to say it's like Snowpiercer.
Yeah, that's 100% that. They need the poor people in the back to serve the functions that the rich people need to continue being rich people.
Not only that, but like kind of like what Kev said with Black Hawk Down, like it's not like they can just go to the Sump. It's not like there's a direct, you know, they have to work their way down the hive.
It'd be a campaign.
And there's no map. They would literally just be wandering around.
It would be a badass city fight campaign. Yeah. Like if you wanted to run a cool tabletop campaign, if we weren't already designing a completely different one, this would have been a great place to start. But having the whole idea of, you know, the noble house has decided to march on the underhive to get into the Sump, or maybe in the hive world that you create for this campaign, or a hive world that you create for a campaign of your own, there's a house like Van Saar that has an STC. Looking at the way that they are, and looking at the fact that the top of a hive is much smaller than the base of a hive, let's say that the upper hive has a population of 15 million people. Let's say the mid hive has a population of 25 to 32 billion people, and the underhive has a population of 50 billion people. So you're going to take an organized military that can pull on the resources of 15 million and try to march through 85 billion.
Well, think about it. The mid hive really wouldn't care.
Oh, the mid hive will care because the mid hive relies on the underhive more than the upper hive does. So the mid hive houses in general, in the majority of the examples we have, even Atoma Prime with Tertium, the mid hive houses pull their recruits from the gangs of the underhive. So the members of Escher, the members of the people who become Goliath, the people who become Van Saar, they're all either out of the bloodline of the gang, now noble house, or they're recruited from the underhive. Think of the Imperial Fists. The Imperial Fists recruit from the underhive.
Oh yeah, they love it.
There's so much reliance on the mid-hive on the underhive existing. You need that population.
That's just me thinking. It's like if all these STCs and all this Archotech's there, now it's important.
Yeah.
How come nobody's marching down there just
You
taking it?
I guess the answer to that is in the hundreds of Hive cities that are covered in lore, an STC has been found in one.
Oh.
You're being a Tom right now. You're saying ideas without thinking about the action that it takes to do that idea.
Dude, no, I do get it.
I've read a book
more than once.
Shade.
I want 1 million songs on this phone. Get on it.
It's easy. Think of all the different branches of the Imperium. Let's take the Mechanicus. Say it's a planet the Mechanicus has good relations with. And the planetary governor going, oh, well, this is going to bring me even more wealth because the SEC is going to be here. The Mechanicus is going to use it here. Do whatever you want to the Underhive.
You remind me of a noble's son.
And that's what happens.
I was going to say, you remind me of a noble's son, like on shrooms. He's like, I have this idea. Right?
Where's that?
I'm gonna take it to my dad.
Yep.
The group of super rich people from the super rich kids from the 1800s, the fine young cannibals or whatever. They just had these weird ideas, and they would take them to their parents, and their parents would be like, "You're dumb. Go do drugs in the countryside and don't talk to us."
Right.
So,
but Dad, there's technology down there. I'm telling you.
So what happens is
so
if a reliable
you cleanse because it'd be a cleansing. Well, I mean, that's my next question then. I know it's kind of going off on a tangent, but cultists, mutants.
Yeah.
So what's to say the Inquisition's not going to show up and say
because at the end of the day, the trash takes care of itself.
Yeah, when you got low on low crime, who cares?
Yeah. And that's literally how the hives think. For an example, the Arbites generally don't go into the Underhive because the Underhive polices itself.
Yeah, the gangs take care of that.
When you've got mega tech Yakuza capable of dealing with everybody else, you just let the Yakuza deal with it. That's essentially the ideal of the Administratum. The Administratum doesn't waste resources under a certain sublevel. Now, here's where it changes.
I got a map.
If an Imperial operative discovers something bad enough, and we talk about the Glass Eater cult a lot, they are going to send the Arbites down. And if the Arbites fail, they're going to send the PDF down. Thank you. And then if the PDF fail, they're going to send the Space Marines down. It's going to ratchet up. If the Space Marines even give a shit. If there's a chapter house in the Hive, a couple of Space Marines might go to deal with it.
Or some shit.
Right. Now, if an Inquisitor takes an interest, an Inquisitor might bring his entire fucking retinue down and do whatever he wants. But the Inquisition doesn't operate out in the open like that. They usually operate a little bit more clandestinely. Now, if an operative of the Inquisition or of the Mechanicum does discover an STC or a lost bastion of tech or something down in the Sump and it is securable, they will mobilize and start entire campaigns to get it. They will wipe the Hive planet off the face of the planet. They'll destroy the whole fucking thing without ever invading it so they can mine this Sump. Think about cracking an egg. You can drill a tiny hole in the egg and send troops in, or you can just break the egg open and spill everything everywhere and then pick through the wreckage. And that's what they'll do. They'll destroy the entire Hive and they'll pick through the wreckage. They'll orbitally bombard it out of existence so they can get to the Sump faster.
You imagine the...
Well, I mean, it's happened. It's happened.
No, I'm just saying, but
it's happened. Nobles sitting there with an Inquisitor.
What do you need the top layer for?
Yeah.
Fucking just...
Why do you even need to ask the noble house's permission when it's the noble house of who cares subsector of Dickus, no one knows about you sector.
Gonna be erased off the map in one volley of lance fire.
Yeah.
Boop. Oh, now their opinion doesn't matter.
However, all that being said, I totally dig the idea of a city fight campaign over many, many different battles that's specifically the Skitarii marching through the Underhive trying to get to the Sump. It just and playing with the whole idea. It would be a cool campaign. You could give the Imperium forces, the Skitarii forces, the Mechanicum forces, like, you have 30,000 points. Every time you lose a game against your opponent, you lose that points from your total. Your opponent doesn't have a point limit. They can constantly field 2,000 point armies. They don't have this. Can you make it through all 10 battles without losing all 30,000 points, or whatever you decide on? And that would sell the desperation of that. And then to make it even better, you do something where, like, maybe the first mission of that campaign, you fight, the Mechanicus player fights against one Hive gang. But that second mission, okay, that one Hive gang told everyone. Now you're fighting two opponents and they each have 15,000 or 1,500 points. And then that third game, now you're fighting three opponents and they each have 1,000 points. And that fourth game, now you're fighting four opponents and they each have, 1,000. It just, every time you fight the next force, they have a little bit more, right? And can you do it? And then you have the option. Okay, you can call in reinforcements. Like, you get to, maybe you roll on a die, and if you roll high enough, a detachment of Inquisition or a detachment of the PDF or whatever comes with you. It'd be interesting. It'd be dope. That'd be a cool story.
It'd be a good city fight.
But that's essentially, to get back to our last episode where we talked about Darktide, that's essentially where the game of Darktide is taking place. In the case of Darktide and Inquisition, an inquisitional operation, that's the way to say that. It's sending operatives in to see how bad the cult is, because if the cult is bad enough, they're just going to wipe the fucking Hive off the face of the planet, or wipe the planet out of existence. But very, very easily, you can extrapolate and move that story to the side and say, these operatives are going in to see if there's an STC. These operatives are going in to see if there's Xenotech. These operatives are going in to see if Administratum records have been located. Like, you can give each, and even in the gameplay of Darktide, there are hints to that. There are a couple of times, there's a mission where you're sent in to, like, reset a reactor. Why are you really resetting the reactor? Are you resetting the reactor because the cult did something? Or are you resetting the reactor because the Inquisition needs access to that technology that the reactor is powering? And you're being sent into an area to, like, clear. There's one of the missions where you're being sent in to clear out and kill this high value target. But as you're going through it, it's pretty obvious that you're going through, like, habs and, like, educational areas. And say, okay, are you actually going in to stop the cult, or are you clearing out this area because there's a bunch of Administratum records there that need to be rescued? And you get all of these various things that, like, modern militaries do when they do operations.
I'm gonna pitch a game to
that's totally a neighborhood.
I'm gonna
sorry, you're a little quiet there.
I'm gonna pitch a game to Fat Shark called Dicktide, where it's all Slanesh instead of Nurgle.
Yes.
And you can't stop it.
Perfect.
All right, Kevin, go ahead. Sorry.
DLC 1 Dicktide.
I was going to say, it would be, that'd be good.
You actually got, what's his face from Breaking Bad? Eisenhorn, actually making more warp dust the entire time.
Heisenberg.
Yep. Doritos.
Oh yeah, this whole sector is revolted. And I mean, the Imperium is known for doing stuff like that, where it's just like, oh yeah, that whole sector is beyond lost. Cool, close the doors and burn them out.
I mean, the first Gaunt's Ghost novel, they're sent in to put down this renegade chaos group, and then they start exploring, and they come across a diseased STC, and then it becomes clear to Gaunt that the orders were recover this STC, and Gaunt decides to destroy it. So, the Imperium...
And the command wouldn't tell him that that's what the orders were.
Yeah. So the Imperium isn't even above lying to the troops. The troops might be sent in to, like, stop the plague of unbelief, but they're really there for something completely different.
Yeah. Oh yeah, chaos cult. No,
the
you're
demonettes.
just there to clean house so that the mechanicus doesn't have to answer any questions.
Like, man,
They're
this
there
chaos
for the
cult just
demonettes.
looks like poor people.
This chaos cult looks like poor people, women, and children. Man,
So weird how they disguise themselves.
remember, no high gothic.
Right. Oh my god. That got dark real quick. So we are on episode 65, Marky, and episode 69 is going to be our sex, drugs, and rock and roll episode. So you
It
can
better
bring
be.
up Slanish as much as you want.
Thank God.
That's all it's gonna be about.
Finally made it, guys.
I'll probably
Finally
yell
there.
at you a bunch that
Finally
Slanish
gonna
doesn't
make it there.
have to mean sex, but it's fine. We'll get there.
You mean it doesn't have to be?
Slanish is excess. Like that.
Yeah.
so
so
that-
exactly.
that's the common
Excess
misconception.
sex.
Oh no.
That's the common misconception about Slanish. Everybody immediately goes boobies and porn. Slanish is the god of excess. The way that Fulgrim went insane was
I
he
know, I
was
read the
trying
novel.
to paint a better portrait, and that was driving him nuts. The Noise Marines exist because the Remembrancers tried to make better musical instruments than existed, and the Marines had to stop them. Like, none of that is related.
That's not how it goes in the novel.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
The
what
the
makes-
Remembrancers?
It was a giant. The author basically made Lady Gaga in 30K. She made the instruments. All the Marines that were there with no armor decided to walk into the giant orgy that was happening and start ripping everybody apart.
Right,
Then they
but the
grabbed
thing,
the weapons and went, "Wow, these are amazing."
but the thing that you're missing there, the nuance that you're missing there, is that it was an orgy of carnage, not an
Well,
orgy of
The
fucking.
humans were having. Oh, it was just an orgy of everything.
Yeah, but it was described as an orgy. Like there's that's the thing. Like,
Can you define orgy?
Basically, there were things getting put in every orifice, whether they wanted it to or not, and everybody was enjoying everything.
I don't think that's the definition of orgy.
Well, that's what happened.
Well, have you ever been to one?
I need a definition.
And
I
then
need the
Space
definition.
Marines.
I think
were
the
Careful,
best
you're
way
not
is
looking
to
at images.
experience it.
Careful, you're not looking at images. God damn it, Ryan. Why? You left it on images.
Oops.
We're going to get in trouble.
Again.
Wow.
I was just about to say that, too. I was like,
so
wait.
the argument he was just having, he just lost because of what we saw.
well, wait. Okay. So first off, I'm going to give you the definition of an orgy, which is going to 100% prove your point. And then I'm going to use language to explain why assuming
kind of
it's
orgy?
sex is wrong. So an orgy is wild or drunken festivities or revelry, especially involving sex with multiple participants. However, the usage of blood orgy doesn't mean sex in blood. It means we are murdering everybody.
Yeah, that's what the Space Marines did. They walked
So
in and started tearing people in half with their bare hands.
So an orgy of carnage would
While the
be
humans were having
a bunch
an
of
orgy.
people murdering each other.
So the normal humans
So it's
were
almost
having
like
an
a
orgy,
slang.
and the Space Marines walked in
It
and
can
just
be
started
used.
tearing them apart and
So-
killing them.
So what happened is a famous remembrancer was put
Lady
in
Gaga.
position of making a giant orchestra to celebrate the Emperor's children. And
You know what
there were
makes-
Space Marines in the audience that were listening to it. And the music was so perfect because Slanish had touched the music that it drove everybody nuts. Parts of the human audience started having sex with each other. Parts of the human audience started ripping each other's throats out with their teeth. Parts of the human audience started to carve chairs into exquisite art that had never been experienced before. Part of the human audience started to paint with the blood and feces of the dying because it was better colors. Part of the human audience started to hum and sing in levels that had never been experienced
I'm not disagreeing
before.
with any of this.
And then the Space Marines, realizing
apart.
that it was going bad, ripped into them to try to kill what they were seeing as demons coming forth. And then some of the Marines decided that grabbing the sonic instruments was better. And when they picked them up, they went crazy and became what they were trying to fight. So the birth of the Emperor's Children is like
Amazing.
2% sex, 98% every other massive deviation of excess that exists. But because we're human and because we're largely a male-based gaming population, we're like 2% sex, let's focus 98% of our energy on it, which annoys me a lot because Slaanesh is way more than that.
I agree, and that's why I appreciate Slaanesh is the fact that it's not just sex, that it's the excess of
it's also
everything.
Drugs and rock and roll.
Yes, agreed. But I'm gonna throw this in there. But what makes everything better? Sex. It's like the cherry on top. So it's like the I'm not a fan of the maraschino cherries, but it's the focal point. You know, it's the one thing you're staring. Like there's all that nice stuff around it, but it's the one thing you're looking at, right? So it's like the focal point of Slaanesh.
It's the hook.
Yeah.
It's the hook and drag you in.
Yeah. And the term that's used more with Slaanesh is hedonism, and that's because it's all hedonistic things. It's not just sexual proliferativity.
I know, but it's the most fun thing to talk about.
Yes. And I know it's going to come up and be 90% of that episode, and I'm going to be like, Slaanesh is deeper. Deeper.
Literally deeper.
That's what she said. That's what she said.
All of it.
So much deeper than that, Marky. But well, guys, this is just a taste of the weapons and tech a Hive might contain. In general, if it exists in Warhammer 40k and someone living in the Hive is either rich or resourceful enough to get their hands on any of the pieces of technology we just talked about. From lost and forgotten tech to Necron Blaster that not even a Space Marine have encountered on the battlefield, you never know what a Hive, like Atoma Prime's Tertium, Hive Primaris on Necromunda, or even Innsmouth Hive itself may hide. Want to get into contact with us about the show or share your own short stories, lore, and spooky dookies? You can reach us by email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com or jimdarkgaming@gmail.com. You can also reach us through our community on Discord. We chat about Warhammer 40k lore, hobby, and tactics, plus we discuss Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, creative writing, video games, Magic the Gathering, role-playing games, and quite a bit more. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, or find us at our website, which is www.underthehiveofmadness.com. Please like and review us wherever you get your podcast fix. Our home is Spotify and Anchor FM, but we are also on Apple, Google, Audible, Stitcher, and many more. Support us through our Patreon at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. Patreon members get access to video podcasts with minimal editing, so you can see our faces, follow along with what we're looking at on screen, and hear our bloopers in real time. All Patreon levels also get access to our quarterly painting contest, plus we have perks at higher levels, so I encourage you to go on over and check it out. Proving us Underhivers don't have to subsist off paper rations alone, it's Mama Kaz's Noodle House, home of the 3-cred endless Liz Gizzard ramen pot. Don't forget her famous Hive Habroof rice wine, voted best soju in the stacks.
That was super sexual, Chuck.
He likes that soju.
A little worried there.
Wow. Not on that episode yet.
Proving overgrown mutant rats aren't the only unwholesome creatures let loose across the Underhive. We are the Lost Souls of Rebellion, 665.66 UHMA Chemrat Radio. Reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and Sump Ghoulies to keep those dials fixed. Right here, same ratty frequency for the same ratty-ass attitude. Like the old-timers say, a pinch of corpse starch over your left shoulder and 30 chits of silver keep the four-armed collector at bay.
I like that one.
Thanks. I was like, how do I do the pinch of salt one?
That was a good one.
Good.
Hey, Kev, did you catch the we don't have to subsist off paper rations alone?
Yeah.
That was for you.